you're listening to Unapologetic Edge. Today I want to talk to you about something that's been coming up constantly in my practice lately. And it's this feeling that so many women describe where they say, I just can't hold as much as I used to. And they say it with this tone of confusion and shame, like they're waiting for me to tell them that something's wrong with them. Because on paper, nothing major has changed. Same job, same family, same life. But suddenly it feels like they're operating at maximum capacity all the time. Like their brain is full before they've even got to work in the morning. Like they're constantly one small thing away from completely losing it. And what they want to know is, why can't I cope with things I used to manage fine? So let's talk about it. Because what's happening isn't personal failure. It's not a character defect. It's not even that you need better time management or meditation practice. What's happening is a fundamental shift in how your nervous system functions. And until you understand that, you're going to keep blaming yourself for something that actually makes complete biological sense. What we're actually talking about when someone says mental load. Okay, so first, let's get clear on what we mean by the mental load, because I think this term gets thrown around a lot, but we don't always understand what we're describing. The mental load isn't your to-do list. It's not the tasks themselves. It's the holding of everything. It's knowing when the permission slips are due, tracking which kid needs what for which day, sensing that your teenager is off before they've said a word, remembering that your partner has that big presentation coming up, so you need to keep things calmer at home, knowing what's in the fridge and what needs to be bought and what needs to be cooked before it goes off, anticipating what might go wrong and having backup plans ready. Managing everyone's emotional states while suppressing your own because there's simply no space for yours right now. That's the invisible work of anticipating, remembering, monitoring, coordinating, and adjusting. And here's what makes it particularly exhausting. Most of this labor is invisible. To everyone else, things just magically run smoothly. They don't see the massive amounts of cognitive and emotional work that's required to make that happen. And look, I want to be really clear here. I'm not interested in getting into gender wars about who does more housework. That's not what this is about. What I'm interested in is what happens in your nervous system when you're carrying this level of invisible, unacknowledged responsibility, particularly when you hit perimenopause, because that's when everything changes. It worked before. Here's the thing. For most of us, we've been carrying some version of this mental load for years, maybe decades. And earlier in life, you had more margin. Your hormones, particularly estrogen and progesterone, were supporting your stress response. You recovered from stressful events faster. Your sleep, even if it was interrupted by young children or work stress, was more restorative. Your nervous system could spike and then settle back down relatively quickly. You could run on adrenaline for a while and then crash and recover. Basically, your system had a buffer. Room for error, room for extra demand, room to absorb the occasional crisis without falling apart. So the mental load felt heavy, absolutely, but manageable. And you learned something during that time. You learned, if I just stay organized enough, if I stay on top of things, I can keep myself together. I can handle this. And that belief served you well. It got you through a lot. But then perimenopause enters the picture. And suddenly those same strategies that always worked before don't. And that's incredibly disorienting. So what does perimenopause actually do? So let's talk about what's actually happening in perimenopause, because I think most women are given a very simplistic understanding of it. Hot flashes, irregular periods, maybe some mood swings. But perimenopause affects so much more than that. It affects your stress tolerance, your emotional regulation, your sleep architecture, how much cognitive load you can hold, how long it takes you to recover from anything, stress, illness, a bad night's sleep, an emotional conversation. In other words, it affects your capacity, and it happens gradually. It's not like you wake up one day and suddenly everything's different. It's insidious. Little things start shifting. You notice you're more irritable. You forget things that you never used to forget. You can't seem to focus the way you used to. Small things feel disproportionately overwhelming. And because it's gradual, you don't realize it's your system changing. You think it's you failing. So here's what's actually happening physiologically. As estrogen and progesterone start fluctuating and declining, your stress response system becomes more reactive. Your HPA axis, that's the system that regulates your stress hormones, becomes less flexible. You move into fight or flight faster, you stay there longer, you don't come down as easily. Your sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented, which means you're getting less actual restoration, even if you're in bed for 8 hours. Your cognitive processing slows down slightly. Working memory gets affected. The ability to switch between tasks effectively decreases. And all of this means your margin for absorbing additional demands shrinks. Now, here's the cruel part. During this same period, often your life is getting more complex, not less. Children are older and their needs are more emotionally complex. Aging parents might need support. Work responsibilities have often increased. Relationships might be strained. Financial pressures might have ramped up. So you're carrying the same mental load, often more, but the system carrying it has fundamentally changed. That mismatch, that gap between demand and capacity, that's where burnout begins. So why do you think you're failing? And here's where it gets really painful, because the overload doesn't announce itself as, I'm exhausted. Not at first. It shows up as irritability, brain fog, forgetting obvious things, emotional flooding, where you go from fine to completely overwhelmed in seconds. Patience that you could measure in microseconds, resentment that sits in your chest like a stone. And because you've always been the capable one, the one who holds it together, you interpret all of this as personal failing. You think, what's wrong with me? I used to be able to manage this. Why am I suddenly so incompetent? So you try to fix yourself. You make more lists, better systems. You try to be more disciplined, more organized, more controlled. You read books about productivity. You try meditation apps. You beat yourself up for not being more resilient. And all of it, just adds more to the mental load. Now you're carrying everything you were already carrying, plus the responsibility of managing your own struggling system. You're asking a system that's already operating at reduced capacity to now also monitor and regulate itself. No wonder it feels impossible. So why just do less doesn't actually help? Okay, so this is where the advice actually comes in. You need to simplify your life. Learn to say no, delegate more, ask for help, just self-care. And look, I'm not saying that those things are bad advice. Sometimes they genuinely help, but often they completely miss the point, because the problem isn't just what you're carrying. The problem is that your nervous system is already operating so close to the threshold that everything feels impossibly heavy. When your system is that activated, even small demands feel overwhelming. It's not about the magnitude of any individual thing. It's about the relentlessness. It's the accumulation. Every small decision, every small request, every small thing that needs remembering or managing or coordinating on their own, none of them are huge. But together, when your system has no buffer left, they're crushing. And this is why rest doesn't always help you the way you expected it to. You go away for the weekend and you feel better for about 3 days. Then you're right back where you were because your nervous system never fully comes down anymore. You're not actually recovering. You're just taking a brief pause before resuming the same level of activation. If you're mothering through this, well, now if you're mothering while going through perimenopause, there's an additional layer here that I think needs naming because children's needs change as they get older in ways that can actually be more demanding on your nervous system. When they're little, the demands are physical. You're tired, yes, but the needs are relatively straightforward. Green cup, blue cup, milk, water. As they get older, especially into the teen years, the demands become more emotionally complex. They're navigating identity, relationship, mental health, challenges, academic pressure. If you've got neurodivergent children, there's often more complexity around managing school environments, social situations, emotional regulations. You're not just managing logistics anymore. You're holding emotional safety for other humans while your own system is already stretched. And every decision they make can be life-altering. And this is where women often feel the most guilt because they find themselves being more reactive with their children than they want to, shorter tempered, less patient, more easily overwhelmed by the emotional intensity their teenagers bring. And that it's a parenting failure, but it's not. It's a capacity signal. Your nervous system is trying to tell you something, and beating yourself up for being a bad mother just compounds the load you're already carrying. So if the answer isn't just do less or get better at coping, what is it? The answer starts with understanding where capacity is actually being lost and why your old strategies don't work anymore. This is where we shift from self-judgment to curiosity, from what's wrong with me to what's my system responding to? Because when we can see the mental load through this lens as a nervous system capacity issue rather than a personal failing, a few things change. You stop pathologizing completely normal reactions to abnormal levels of demand. You stop treating exhaustion as a character defect that you need to overcome with more discipline. You stop asking your body to perform at a cost it genuinely cannot afford anymore. And that opens space for something different. Not necessarily easier, but more honest, more aligned with what your system actually needs rather than what you think you should be able to handle. And that's not giving up. That's the beginning of actual regulation. That's the beginning of working with your system instead of against it. Look, if this episode feels uncomfortably accurate, I want to say this really clearly. Your capacity didn't disappear. It changed. And midlife is asking you to acknowledge that change and work with it rather than trying to override it with sheer force of will and caffeine or wine. In the episodes coming up, we're going to keep unpacking what actually supports women through this phase of life without minimizing the complexity you're living, without pretending it's simple or that you just need better boundaries and a bubble bath. For now, I want you to sit with this. What feels like too much right now? What feels like too much right now isn't a moral failing. It's information. Your system is trying to tell you something. And maybe instead of trying to fix yourself, it's worth listening. I'm Philippa, and this is Unapologetic Edge. Thanks for listening.